The city of Sacramento in Central California was not immune to the crimes of serial killers. But even their most experienced police officers never expected to have two killers operating at the same time. In the mid to late 1980s, one of the world's more high-profile cases, Dorothea Puente, the boarding house killer, was receiving much attention from the police and the press. Her boarding house, later dubbed the House of Horrors, was the scene of 7 murders. A journalist at the Sacramento Bee, Tony Harvey, had just moved from Illinois to Oak Park, Sacramento.
When I first arrived here, August 1988, 3 months later, November the 11th, 1988, they started digging out bodies from this house in Midtown Sacramento, 1426 F Street. Then I started wondering, hey, where did I move to? This is kind of creepy. And I think they pulled out like 6 bodies, which later connected to the boarding house later killer by the name of Dorothea Puente. That kind of shocked me, but of course I didn't leave Sacramento. I began working at the Sacramento Union 2 years later, and one of our newspapers that came out that a serial killer trial that was about to start, Maurice Solomon Jr. What was shocking to me, what was very significant at that time, that it was an African American. Black serial killers was very rare, but they were becoming more known at this time, but this one was very rare. I just didn't believe that we had a black serial killer, let alone right here in Sacramento.
Retired Detective John Cabrera was an investigator on both the Puente and Solomon cases.
Maurice Solomon was a year earlier, and we had found several bodies, his victims, in the Oak Park area of Sacramento. And then that was completed, and then here comes Dorothea Puente in 1988. So Sacramento had been rocked by 2 serial killers, with Maurice Solomon, killing the prostitutes in the area, and Dorothea Puente killing her own tenants. And so you're talking, a large amount of people within 2 years that had been murdered by these individuals. Maurice Solomon was a real character. When I first met him was the initial investigation into a body being found at a home, and where he was the handyman that was doing some carpentry there. And he was, at that time, the reporting person. So he was down at headquarters, and I met him because he came in the homicide, and he seemed to like police and hi and talked, and he was just so outgoing, and so nice.
From experience, Detective Cabrera was suspicious. Solomon had called in the discovery of a body he had found in a house he was working on. But there was something in the story that unsettled Cabrera.
There has been other cases where people call and say, hey, I came home and I found this dead person in my house. One of the things about people who do that is you really have to raise an eyebrow to and take a second look at them to make sure, is this the only way that you could get out of this because the person happens to be in your home or the house you're working in or in your car? So you have to come up with this idea that, well, if I call, why would they believe it's me? It's one of those things that they believe is going to work. And in this particular case, there was no way he could get out of him showing up at the house he was already working on and having this body there. So he just thought, well, I'll show up, I'll call him and tell him I found it, and that'll be it.
This house here, 3445 4th Avenue, has 3 levels. As you can see, this is the basement level, then the second level, and then we have the 3rd level. On the 3rd level, the closet on the 3rd level is where they find the remains of Yolanda Yo-Yo Johnson. And she was spread eagle, half nude from the waist down. And she had some bodily fluids on her left thigh, which showed that it was semen, and that was from the perpetrator himself, Maurice Solomon Jr. So he had sex with this woman, and then he strangled her and killed her. Now, I have to tell you, on the strangle part, it was never established that he had strangled her, but that's what the police think. But it was never put in writing that she was strangled, because the body was decomposing so bad they couldn't establish a true identity of death. This is one of the houses that he was working on, and he had to have the house finished the day before the owner came, but he didn't have it. I mean, the house was finished, but he had killed his woman, So it was like, oh man, I got this dead body, I can't move it, so I'm gonna call the police and let them know that it's a dead body here.
Yolanda, a street prostitute, was Solomon's first known victim. She'd been using the property as her trick pad, a place to bring dates and have sex with them. Solomon took advantage of many of the local sex workers, but for Yolanda, there would be deadly consequences.
He would hook up with these girls, provide, the drugs, and they would basically party all night. In her particular case, for whatever reason, he decided he was going to kill her. And so he did.
22-year-old Yolanda Johnson was most likely killed on the 15th of June, 1986. It was 3 days later when Solomon made the call that he had found a body. On March 19, 1987, workers digging a ditch in the backyard of an abandoned house in South Sacramento unearthed the decomposed body of 18-year-old Maria Apodaca. The victim was an addict and a prostitute. She'd been missing for several months. She'd been buried at a small depth of 3 feet and was wrapped in plastic. The pathologist estimated death had occurred 2 to 8 months earlier. Police found evidence to tie Solomon to the murder. 1 month later, while investigating the murder of Maria, police visited Solomon's former home on 44th Street, Oak Park. An unusual depression in the garden was found to be the burial place of the third victim, Cherry Washington, a 26-year-old street worker who was known to Solomon. The property was one that Solomon had worked on. She had been dead for a year. On the same day, police found the body of 17-year-old Sheila Jaycox in another shallow grave. Sheila's nude body was wrapped in bedding and secured with duct tape. A rolled-up sock was found in her mouth. On April 28, 1987, 29-year-old Sharon Massey's body was found in the same property where police had found Maria Apodaca. Her legs, ankles, and thighs were bound with electrical cord, and a fabric strap held her wrists together. And again, a sock was in her mouth. Maurice Solomon Jr., the homicidal handyman of Oak Park, was the suspect in all of the cases.
It was like wherever he was doing a job for the owner, we'd find a body. So, in fact, it got so large, I mean, there were several of us homicide teams. We were all split up, working the various different homicides. Morse was definitely a serial killer, and a deadly one at that. He is probably one of the deadliest serial killers that I've ever seen or worked around, simply because you never knew when he was going to commit the crime. He could be a nice guy, and then he could turn just like that and end up killing you. He could roam among people in the community, and at any given time, whenever he felt it necessary, he'd kill one of them. For whatever reason, I don't know, but he'd kill one of them. And that's what made him deadly. And we don't even know, there are probably, and we believe, there are far more than we have found in Sacramento. And mind you, we haven't even found the bodies of 4 missing girls that I truly believe that he's connected to by witness statements. But we still haven't found their bodies. And he in no way is going to cooperate with us and tell us where those bodies are buried. But there are 4 more girls that are still missing. And mind you, we had tried him for 7 murders. And we still have 4 missing.
Maurice Solomon Jr. was convicted and sentenced to death and is currently serving his sentence on death row in San Quentin. Relatives and friends of Solomon describe his upbringing in rural Georgia as abusive. He was raised by his grandmother, who, by all accounts, was not a loving relative. Los Angeles-based psychologist Dr. William Vickery testified as to his mental condition in the first murder trial of Solomon.
In the Solomon case, his background is really a key to understanding the crimes. He came from a family background in which his mother was a prostitute. And she would leave to go into the city to do her work, abandoning Maurice and his little sister in the care of the grandmother. And the grandmother was a very brutal, sadistic woman who forced them to work in her laundry operation, where she was doing shirts and other laundry for wealthier people in her area. And she was a perfectionist. And so if they were washing a shirt or ironing a shirt, if there was anything that was not clean, she would have them wash it again. And if anything was pressed and that there was a wrinkle in it, she would force them to do that again. And they would be beaten with a whip. And sometimes they would be beaten mercilessly. And there were scars and welts and bruises. And this went on for years. So, I mean, he must have harbored a great deal of hatred and feeling of vengeance about his grandmother. And then his mother is not there to protect him, because what is she doing? She's prostituting herself. You see? I mean, he must have some very strong, pent-up, angry, rageful feelings about these women that had tortured him and abandoned him and not protected him. He had no childhood. I think he was regarded in the community as a very meek, soft-spoken fellow who was always friendly and always helpful, and was a handyman. And if something went wrong with your window or door or toilet or something like that, he was the man that could fix it. So that was his role, and that's how he supported himself. I don't think anybody thought that such a meek, mellow, kindly soul would be capable of violent, homicidal acts.
Author Tony Harvey decided to write a book about the Maurice Solomon case. The journey to complete The Homicidal Handyman of Oak Park took many years, and even in the first few weeks, he wondered how he was going to cope.
The first time when we went in this room at the Sacramento courthouse to look at the exhibits, it's 600 exhibits. So you're looking at diagrams, mostly crime scene photos, and some other material. When I got to the crime scene material, that was the tough part, because now you see how the victims were found after they were, quote unquote, murdered. And after the first day, I mean, as soon as I stepped out the courthouse after looking at them the first day, I was pretty close to regurgitating outside the courthouse, because it was painful. It was painful. And then you're looking at these crime scene photos, they were all women. And you're looking at them, it's like, well, you know, they're sisters, mothers, cousins, devout mothers to be exact, and you find them in this condition, and it was pretty tough to absorb, to process. It was just strange to know that he can do these things, because Maurice is no taller than like 5'6", and when he was arrested, he probably was like 120 pounds, because, you know, he was addicted to crack cocaine at the time, and it's like, where did he get the power to overcome these women, to do these things? But he found a way. But it was just, oh boy, it was just really strange to know that he could pull off these type of murders. And he did. He did.
A crucial element of Tony's research was to meet Solomon. Sitting opposite a serial killer is an unlikely experience. But it was needed to understand fully the mind and history of Maurice Solomon.
Well, first, just trying to get into San Quentin State Prison to see this guy was a task within itself. I wrote to Maurice Solomon about 4 or 5 times, and he kept rejecting my letters. He did not want me to come see him. He did not want me to come talk about the case. He hadn't did an interview in the prison itself since, I would say, January 1994. All of a sudden, I get a letter, maybe the 5th letter, I get a letter back from him. It's like, you know, you're like a dog pulling on a bone. You won't let it go. So I tell you what, I'm gonna let you come down, and we'll talk about it. So, you know, I got jazzed up. He sends me the paperwork. The warden at the time signed off on it. I want to say August 13, 2005. That's when I went to San Quentin State Prison, and I met Maurice Solomon Jr., the homicidal handyman, for the first time. Which was really weird, because death row inmates, they call the canteen their gourmet food. I was buying him Dr. Pepper, buffalo wings, potato chips. So he's sitting in this cubicle. It's like a fiberglass cubicle while I'm getting these things together. But he has on handcuffs. So he's sitting there with handcuffs. When it was time for me to go in and sit down and talk to him, there was a wooden table and 2 wooden chairs sitting in there. The correction officers open the door and I go inside, and then he leans back, Maurice Solomon Jr. leans back on the fiberglass door because there's a little opening there, and he takes his key and he takes off the handcuffs. So immediately I started getting these butterflies in my stomach. It's like, wow, okay, you guys gonna let me sit in here with a serial killer, someone who has killed 6 or 7 people and perhaps more. You're gonna let me sit in here by himself. I'm a little nervous, to tell you the truth. But then I realized after that first meeting why it was okay. And this was with same thing with all the death row inmates at the time, at least on this section they called North Segregation. It was like a penthouse of San Quentin State Prison. This is where all the death row people, they could commute together, they can cook and stuff like that. It's only 65 people on this tier, and they're all death row inmates. So if you do anything, if you mess around and mess up those privileges, you're out of there. You're off of North Seg. You're back in the general population with all the other death row inmates. So Maurice didn't want to lose those benefits and stuff. So once I found that out, I felt way more comfortable about being in that cubicle with him all alone. I went to visit him again. This time I started talking more about the victims. And Maurice, today he still denies the killings and stuff, but he knew all of these women. But he never said that he killed them. Towards the end of those 2 hours that I met with him, I was asking, hey, Maurice, well, did you kill so-and-so? No. Okay, well, did you kill Sharon Massey? No. Okay, well, did you kill Maria Apodaca? No. He started getting upset. And then for like the last 30 minutes of that interview, he was real quiet. He would not say a word. It's almost like I was getting under his skin. It really opened up my whole perspective of doing these true crime novels after interviewing him. Before then, you're working off of court documents and you're interviewing other people, which even makes it more fascinating. But once you sit down and you talk to the killer, and it's just you and him, eye to eye, and you're discussing everything under the sun, it changes the whole dynamics of what you're working on. You're actually talking to a killer. And you think he's an innocent man. But if you look at the case, which was built solely upon circumstantial evidence, it all points to him. He was doing this stuff over an 18-year span, probably even longer than that because he was in Vietnam. He was born into a culture of violence. And his MO of bound, gag, rape, and kill, all that comes into play when you talk about Maurice Solomon Jr. No, we don't want to glorify the killer or anything like that, but I do have the utmost respect for the victims and their families and what they went through. And there's still people that's coming to me this day with more information about this guy. He was a piece of work.
The last time I saw Maurice, a picture of him, he just looked so different than when I first met him. And I don't know if he's even still in good health. I always believed, given what's going on with the death penalty in California, that he'll die of old age before he's executed. But he will not talk about any bodies that may be missing or other victims. He won't talk about it. As a homicide detective, I worked that job for 15 years. I have seen so much death, so much violence that's been perpetrated upon people by other people. Given that, it's never made me hard in my thoughts or my feelings about other people. I've never taken these cases personal. Yes, I would like to have closed these cases. Yes, I would like to have made arrests, but I never let that bother me. I never let that build up inside of me to change me. It was difficult with the family, at times. Yes, that's a difficult thing because we're all human. We feel their pain. And if I could have erased that pain, I would have. But the only way that I knew I could is by giving them some closure, by bringing the case to a close. And that's what we do as homicide detectives. finding the end to a means and bringing some closure for the family.
The case of Maurice Solomon is unique. He is a serial killer. This is proven beyond doubt. But if we had to look for an explanation as to why people kill, and why good people kill, then the only explanation comes from those who are close to the killers.
The warden of San Quentin prison, who had been present at dozens of executions over the years in his service, after he retired, he said something that, like Dr. Pollack, really affected me. He said, "I never met a man that I executed that I did not like." In other words, he had seen their humanity. He knew that they had committed horrific crimes. He knew that they had been found guilty and sentenced to death, and he supervised their executions. But nevertheless, he saw their human qualities as a person.
But on the other side to that is Maurice Solomon Jr. has yet to divulge the location of his other victims. So as likable as he was, the horror continues for many families who just want to know what happened to their loved ones.
If that was the ultimate thing, yes, that would be the question. Why did you kill these women? What led you to kill these women? Why did you rape these women? What led you to rape these women? And how do you feel about the whole thing now? Is there anything that you would do differently after all those years? If there's anything that you would do differently. But then again, how can you help us with the cases that we already have in front of us and the missing person cases? That will always stick out in my mind.
Mark Goudeau hunted women. During his trial, prosecutors referred to him as a ravenous wolf, driven by the hunger to rape women and kill those who didn't cooperate with his demands. His brutal and violent reign in Phoenix, Arizona, lasted 13 months between 2005 and 2006. He murdered 8 women and 1 man, overpowered and sexually assaulted 15 women and young girls, and was convicted on 11 counts of kidnapping, as well as a number of armed robberies. Police labeled him the Baseline Killer, as most of his crimes were committed on Baseline Road, one of Phoenix's main arterial streets. For Goudeau, this was his hunting ground. Initially dubbed the Baseline Rapist, Phoenix police warned residents of a sturdy, light-skinned black man who was sexually assaulting females as young as 12 at gunpoint near Baseline Road. His crimes had no apparent motive other than sexual domination and at times small amounts of money. The murders were particularly brutal, his victims often shot directly in the head. He was born on September 6, 1964, the second youngest of 11 siblings. His mother died when he was 12. He was cared for by his sisters. Court records show the family was plagued by drug and alcohol abuse. 6 of the 11 children are convicted criminals. Trouble began for Mark Goudeau before he left Corona del Sol High School. He and his brother were accused of rape but never charged. The victim moved away and did not prosecute. Goudeau never graduated from high school and seemed to lack success in everything he did. At 24, he fell in love with Wendy Carr. Soon after, in 1989, he clubbed a woman in her apartment, shattering her skull with the butt of a shotgun with sheer brutal force. He hurled her into the bath and attempted to drown her, but was disturbed by a knock at the door. Weeks before his sentencing on that assault charge, he robbed Fry's supermarket at gunpoint. The stolen money later found in a brown paper bag hidden in his apartment. He got off lightly because of timing. Laws have since changed, and prison sentences are now longer and stacked on top of each other. But also in this case, a plea bargain saw 3 sexual assault charges dropped. critical because it meant Mark Goudeau would never appear on the sexual offenders register. Sentenced to 21 years jail, Goudeau became the model inmate. He cleaned up his act, became drug-free, and married Wendy Carr. He was free in just 13 years, a sentence that should have been longer. And if it had been, then maybe many lives would have been saved. On parole, Goudeau got a job in construction and was seen as a hard-working, friendly neighbor and loving husband. But behind his engaging smile was a growing evil. On September 8, 2005, Goudeau murdered 19-year-old Georgia Thompson, gunned down in the car park of her apartment complex near Mill Avenue in Tempe. She was his first known homicide victim. It came a few weeks after he sexually assaulted a pair of junior high girls behind a church near Baseline Road as they walked home from a pool party. The Baseline Killer was born.
He primarily shot. No gun was ever recovered, but he shot and killed his victim, but he also tortured them and was physically violent with them. And he also committed other robberies and sexual assaults. So he was a very violent predator.
5 days after his first kill, Goudeau stalked two sisters, one of whom was clearly pregnant as they walked home from a Phoenix park at night. Armed with a gun, he raped one sister while pushing his gun into the other sister's pregnant belly. DNA evidence collected from this attack eventually helped police identify and capture Goudeau. However, his murderous rampage would continue for another 12 months. Andy Hill was a Phoenix police sergeant at the time. Part of his role was to determine the information that could be released to the public and the media.
We didn't have all the TV station, all the trucks lined up all around every day waiting. And the reason for that was we had tremendous transparency and openness and cooperation, and we reached out to all those people to give them the things they wanted. So the media didn't have to park their trucks out trying to ambush somebody, report them, or do that. They were able to move freely and get the story. And that's the thing about this community that's best, is that, you know, that's the way that we operate in the Phoenix metropolitan area.
On November 3rd, 2005, Goudeau's confidence grew. His need for dominance seemed to intensify. At 8:01 p.m., dressed as a homeless man with a dreadlock wig and wearing a fisherman's hat, he robbed a lingerie store on 32nd Street south of Indian School Road. Minutes later, a woman donating clothes at the charity bin was abducted at gunpoint. She was made to drive out of the area and succumb to his sexual demands. Ultimately, a decision that probably saved her life. Swabs taken from her body were later matched to Mark Goudeau's DNA. Momentous advances in DNA technology were evolving at exactly the same time Goudeau was running amok and terrifying Phoenix residents. Just 4 days later, there was a string of robberies within minutes of each other. 4 people were threatened at gunpoint while they dined at what was Las Brasas, a popular Mexican restaurant. Armed with a .38 handgun, he went next door to Little Caesars Pizzeria and robbed another 3 customers. His adrenaline racing, he stepped outside, mugged another 2 couples walking down the street, celebrating by firing rounds of bullets in the air as he fled. All of his actions were leading to his arrest. On December 12th, Tina Washington, a mother of 3, was on her way home from a Christmas party at the preschool where she worked when she was shot twice in the head at close range. A witness spotted a man in a hoodie holding a handgun and standing over her body. Fear blanketed the city, so Phoenix police formed a task force comprising of 100 full-time officers. In the summer of 2006, Phoenix police spent thousands of hours patrolling and following up on hundreds of tips. There was increasing alarm at the random nature of these violent crimes. Police released a sketch based on the physical description given by surviving victims. All they were looking for was one small piece of information that would eventually lead to his capture. A city distributed posters and plastered billboards with a sketch of their killer, offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest.
You just have to make sure that you're winning the trust of the media so that they know that you're giving them what you can, while at the same time keeping the trust of the investigators and the prosecutors in the case. So it's a delicate balance, and it requires a lot of communication and being available.
Based on the closeness of the investigators, we were able to keep everything that we knew out of the media, and with help of our public information officers who worked hand in hand with us every day. If there was something that we wanted to keep secret, it kept secret. We didn't have any leaks. We had a very tight group. Nowadays, it seems like everybody's getting more information. I find out more information sometimes on the news than I know about the investigation myself. Some of it's real, some of it isn't. But we were able to keep all the information very tightly jarred with a tight lid on it to where nobody really knew what was happening. They were reporting stuff, they would report the cases, but they never knew what we were thinking or what direction we were going.
Mark Goudeau's killing spree escalated yet again on the morning of February 20th, 2006. A double homicide just after 7:30 in the morning. The bodies of 38-year-old Romelia Vargas and 34-year-old Myrna Palma Roman, shot to death inside their snack truck at 91st Avenue and Lower Buckeye Road. Initially, police did not link this crime to the baseline killer and believed the murders were drug-related. The following month, another double homicide followed. 2 employees of Yoshi's restaurant at 24th Street and Indian School Road were on their way home in the same vehicle when they crossed paths with the ruthless baseline killer. Liliana Sanchez Cabrera, 20, was found dead in the parking lot of another fast food restaurant, while Chao Chu was discovered a mile away. Both victims were shot in the head.
I was pretty much in a mode where I would prepare for what I needed to do. And occasionally I would bring particular experts in, often brought in Dr. Stephen Pitt, who is a forensic psychiatrist, because he was able to explain to the public much better than I what some of the things were to consider. I brought the lead investigator into the case in front of the public at some press conferences as well, so that he could express what they were doing. So I tried to collaborate as much as I could as well, because the more information the public has, even if there's no solution yet, the more they know, the more they're aware that the police department is willing to share with them, the better it is in terms of the public remaining peaceful and vigilant and calling in, because there's a great dependency to get tips from the public.
While the baseline killer's body count climbed into unprecedented territory, detectives were also dealing with the so-called serial shooters, 2 serial killers who wreaked havoc at the same time, randomly shooting as they drove down quiet streets. Snipers Dale Hausner and Samuel Dietman murdered at least 6 people and shot many more. The 2 serial killers stalking Phoenix streets drew worldwide interest, and managing that attention became a balancing act.
For me, I don't think the names of those people that commit those types of crimes should ever be mentioned again. That's my personal opinion. I just leave it up to the maker. I was just doing my job, others were doing their job, and we wanted to protect the public. What I think about names, I think about victims' names and their children and all those that were affected, and some of the people that were shot in the serial shooters case who are dying, still dying from the lead that's in their bodies from those shooters, or some of the people, the children of the baseline killer, of his victims, some of those children that are living, or the husbands or spouses that were lost. I think about George Chow, who was killed by Mark Goudeau, and Liliana Cabrera, who was killed, young people with full lives ahead of them who will never get a chance, but they were working hard at their jobs, at their minimum wage jobs, trying to get ahead or go to college. And I mean, there are just so many tragedies to think about that it kind of minimizes even thinking about the suspect.
On March 29, 2006, the baseline killer struck again. A local businessman noticed streaks of blood on the gravel of a parking lot on North 24th Street. The police were called, but a search of the area turned up nothing of value. A week later, the same businessman was investigating a putrid stench in the area. His search discovered the body of Kristen Nicole Gibbons. She'd been found shot in the head and stuffed in a storage unit. Less than 2 weeks later, another body, but this time the victim was known to Mark Goudeau. 37-year-old Sofia Nunez was shot in the head from close range and abandoned in the bathtub of her West Phoenix home. Her 8-year-old son found his mom's body in the overflowing tub when he returned home from school. A crime that was eerily similar to the brutal attack in 1989 that put him in jail for 13 years. Like many serial killers, Mark Goudeau had slipped the net from earlier convictions, but still remained an evil killer. Goudeau had known Sofia Nunez socially, and according to phone records, they had spoken more than 300 times. He knew where she lived. Then, the following month, May 1st, outside the same restaurants where back-to-back armed robberies took place back in November, a man in a latex Halloween mask abducted a woman in her car. He pointed a gun at her and demanded she drive to a residential area and take off her clothes. When she refused his sexual demands, he held a gun at her head and fired. But miraculously, the gun jammed. The victim took that split second of bewilderment to run. Days later, detectives went public with a list of 18 crimes they believe were the work of the baseline killer. This number soon rose to 23. Phoenix police worked with the media and released hundreds of pages of documents that detailed their investigation into the baseline killer, including 20,000 pages of police reports which had very little mention of the real killer. By the summer of 2006, the task force had compiled a list of more than 100 convicted sex offenders who lived in the area the baseline killer was striking. But Mark Goudeau wasn't a registered sex offender due to his earlier conviction in 1989 of assault rather than sexual assault. Police had compiled 10 names of possible suspects, and the investigation was significantly railroaded when burglar James DeWayne Mullins claimed responsibility for the murder of Georgia Thompson on September 8th. Authorities state that Mullins' false declaration caused a significant diversion during the hunt for the genuine killer.
It means a lot to me because to be able to express, from my own particular point of view, what I saw and experienced, I hoped it might help the public to understand the compassion and the concern that law enforcement investigators and those in prosecution, the prosecutors, everybody feels for these victims and their families. And I don't think they get to hear it enough. But I think that it's good to let people know that it's there, because they're not, it's very important in the process of grieving to know that others care.
In early June, ballistics linked shell casings at the Tina, Washington crime scene to those found at other baseline killer scenes. Mullins changed his story after police definitely linked that homicide to the baseline killer. And Mullins' charges were dropped. But precious police time and resources had been wasted. Baseline task force detectives became more vocal in their hunt for the real killer. They insisted that any DNA evidence should be processed with greater urgency. Crime scene techs had found DNA on one of the Phoenix sisters, but at the time deemed it insufficient for testing. That vital piece of evidence sat in the refrigerator at the crime lab for months before being retested. In fact, a lawsuit in the Superior Court alleges the department's failure to test critical DNA swabs in a timely manner ultimately cost several baseline victims their lives. Goudeau struck again on June 29, 2006 for the last time. He stalked 37-year-old Carmen Miranda as she was about to vacuum her car at a self-service car wash on the north side of Thomas Road. Miranda was talking to her boyfriend on a cell phone when she was overpowered by Goudeau. Her boyfriend heard her desperate screams but could do nothing. Goudeau took her car and shot her in the head in a car park behind a barber shop. The security camera captured the violent carjacking, but the video was too grainy for the killer to be identified.
There were some very tragic circumstances for all of these families. I mean, they had spouses, children. Some of the victims were sole supporters for children, particularly Carmen Miranda, one of Mark Goudeau's victims, had 2 young sons, and they were dependent upon her because she was the working mom. And they had come up here to make a life from Mexico, and their mother was murdered. And they tried to stay for a while, but they couldn't, and they ended up going back to Mexico. And we tried to do what we could to help them additionally afterwards. But it's hard to watch families destroyed like that. It makes it very difficult.
The murder of the mother of two caused mayhem and hysteria in the valley. Police plead for calm. One of the 7,000 tips received from the public was from a person within the prison system. A female prisoner identified the homeless man wearing dreadlocks as Mark Goudeau. Task force supervisors took this accusation seriously, and parole officers searched his home and found a ski mask and a realistic toy handgun. The items seized were enough to obtain a search warrant for Mark Goudeau's residence, leading to the discovery of additional items that linked Mark Goudeau to crimes committed by the Baseline Killer. On September 6, 2006, Mark Goudeau was arrested for the sexual assault of the two sisters back in September 2005. His DNA matched a swab taken from one of the sisters he raped at gunpoint. It was his 42nd birthday.
I think that anybody who's gone through and has committed a first-degree murder, or a murder with intent, you realize you're going to have to face a lot of consequences, and you probably try to put those off for as long as you can. Mark Goudeau tried to be safe for as long as he could and not get caught, and we were able, through some great investigative work and a lot of great lab work from particular people, to identify him and get him into custody. He was arrested. Search warrants were served at his home over a period of time. Other evidence had been found that were items that Mark Goudeau took to keep, that were items precious to some of the victims, including jewelry and some other things like that. And they were found in his residence that he had hidden. And then they just put everything together, and particularly the DNA. Once that established that suspect, there was blood evidence and other evidence that produced a clear picture of who the suspect was.
On September 7th the following year, Goudeau was tried and convicted of all 19 charges relating to the attack on the two sisters. He was sentenced on December 14, 2007, to 438 years behind bars for the sexual assault charges. On November 30, 2011, during a marathon 71-day trial, a jury in Phoenix, Arizona sentenced him to death on the 9 counts of first-degree murder relating to the Baseline killings.
I wrote this on September 13th of 2011, 6 in the evening. A city, a metropolitan area in fear, 2 serial killer cases at the same time in the same city, one with 3 suspects and one with a lone predator, 17 murder victims, dozens of other victims, children, adults, and even pets. A child raped, women raped, sodomized, shot and killed, men shot and killed or paralyzed or permanently injured. Some will die from the lead permanently stuck in their bodies. Virtually hundreds of family members, some of whom watched their loved ones suffer the humiliation and trauma of rape. A daughter raped, a woman forced to undress, and when she refused her attacker's attempted rape, had the gun pointed to her head and the trigger pulled. It clicked and she ran. Finally, arrests. But years of suffering still lay ahead for the victims and families. One child raped still remains institutionalized with the horrible consequences of her attack. Many other children of victims have endured years of loneliness without help, trying to grow up, live, provide for themselves, and endure waiting for trial. Then the trials. Rehashing the horrible events, hoping for justice, knowing nothing can change what happened. Missing work and livelihood because they must attend the trial to make sure justice is done, that no one else will suffer as they and their loved ones have. Who sees their faces every day? Who supplements their income so they can make it through? Who provides for the victims' children so they can grow up in a loving home? The media has long forgotten the victims. They will report a verdict, then debate whether capital punishment is fair. The victims and their families endure, their faces filled with pain and memories every day at the trial. It will go on and on while unrepentant killers have million-dollar defense teams paid for by the state. Families who get to visit them in jail and watch the suspects eat their favorite snacks brought to them by loved ones who have to endure the shame of the acts of these unrepentant murderers. Is there justice in the earth? Someday there will be justice, but society and community must care for and about all the victims in the meantime. Caring means the victims and families must not be forgotten. Surely the victims who survived and all the family members and loved ones don't forget. Even a conviction will not stem the tide of the torture of the memories of the evil acts of the suspects. But a loving and caring community can help comfort. Don't forget them. Don't forget them. Don't forget them.